fall. My favorite time of year to make apple pie, and this is the world's best apple pie. We're going to make a lattice pie today. It's fantastic, and it requires 5 pounds of apples, around 15 medium-sized apples. So if you have one of these awesome apple peelers, it makes this job quick and fun. If you don't have one, it's obviously just going to be more labor on your hands by using a peeler and a knife. But I want to show you today how this works if you've never seen one of these. You simply pull back on the handle and place your apple stem side in and turn the knob, and it just nicely removes the peel from this apple, and it's also coring it at the same time. So when you're through and you pull back the handle, you have the core and this lovely spiral cut apple that I'm going to slice in half and place in a bowl, and I'm going to continue this process 14 more times or until I have my 5 pounds of apples sliced up. So the rest of the ingredients you'll need for this pie are salt, brown sugar, white sugar, flour, a lemon, cinnamon, cardamom, vanilla, and nutmeg. I like to use Golden Delicious, Gala, and Granny Smith apples for my recipe. We need the zest of 1 lemon. This is an odd ingredient for an apple pie, but I found it to be fantastic. It adds great flavor. So zest the lemon, cut it in half, and go ahead and juice that lemon over top of your apples, just so that they don't turn brown. If you're cutting by hand, you might want to do this at the beginning in the bottom of the bowl and continually mix your apples over the juice to keep them from browning too much. Take a deep-sided skillet on medium heat and add the zest. To that, you'll add your apples. You're going to fill up this skillet and you're going to wonder how it can hold all the ingredients, but it will because they all cook down. 3/4 of a cup of white sugar, 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar, 1/3 of a cup of flour for the thickener, 1/4 teaspoon salt, 1½ teaspoon cinnamon, 3/4 teaspoon nutmeg, the wonderful cardamom, 3/4 teaspoon, and stir well. You need to stir these every 3 or 4 minutes with the lid on so that you can start to cook the apples. This is the unique part of this recipe, that the apples are cooked and not just placed in the pie. And I believe this is what makes this world class. After you've cooked the apples for around 20 minutes, when they're fork tender to your liking, you'll add the vanilla. These apples will not cook anymore once the pie is baked, so make sure you get them to the texture that you like. Stirring this vanilla into these apples makes your whole kitchen smell like fall. Then place the apples onto a sheet pan. We're going to cool these apples. You can do this at room temperature or in the refrigerator. Sometimes I sit it outside on the deck just to cool them off before we place them in the crust. You can also do this a day or 2 ahead of time. Now we'll work on the pastry or the pie dough. I like to use a lightly floured surface with mine. You can obviously buy pie crust, but I made my own. These have been in the refrigerator, and you need to get them out and let them warm a bit at room temperature before we start to roll them out. It makes the process way easier. So for the bottom layer, we're going to have a 2-crust pie here because we're going to do the lattice top. So we'll want to roll our pie dough in a circle. So simply take your rolling pin, put a little flour on it as well, and continue to roll until you have a nice circle that's about the size of whatever pie plate you're using. I like to use the rolling pin to transfer the crust or the pie dough onto the pan. Then simply work the dough around down into the pan. And then we're going to add our cooled pie filling. It'll make a nice big pie. Spread it out evenly and set it aside. Now we're going to do the lattice top, and this requires a rectangular shape, not round. So we'll start with a more squared off or rectangular dough. Continue to turn it as you roll it to keep it from sticking. And we're going to end up with a rectangle that's around 12 inches long and about 10 inches wide. I'm going to use a little crimped wheel, but you could certainly use a knife. And we're going to cut 4 strips that are about 1.5 inches each. My ruler happens to be about 1.5 inches wide, so it makes it quite easy. Once we get the 4 strips, we're going to cut each strip in half again so that we have 8 even strips of pie dough. Then to make the lattice top, we need to place 4 of the strips vertically across the pie. And go ahead and even them out so we can have a nice even grid when we're finished. Roll back the 2nd and the 4th strip, and then place another strip horizontally across the top, and then replace the verticals over top. And then we're going to lift up the opposite. So we're going to peel back the 1st and the 3rd vertical strips, add another horizontal, replace them, and then we simply repeat the process. So we're going to lift up 2 and 4, add another horizontal strip, replace them, and lastly, 1 and 3 are up. Add the last or 8th strip and replace the vertical strips. I try to even it out a little bit if I can so that we can make it as nice a grid as possible, but we aren't after perfection. After all, we want to make this look homemade. Take a scissor and trim the lattice around the edge. Fold under any extra crust from the bottom and go around the whole pie so that you have it nice and crimped off. And then I just like to do this with my fingers and my thumb. You can do this with a fork. There's a lot of ways you can finish off the crust. And when you get to the end, we like to brush it with a little milk or egg wash, sprinkle it with a little sugar, and it needs to go in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. While it's in the fridge, we want to preheat a sheet pan on 425 degrees. Once the oven reaches 425, you're going to place your pie on the hot sheet pan in the oven, so be careful. We're going to bake for 15 minutes. While it's baking, we're going to get ready to add a crust shield. If you have one of these, great. If you don't, you can make one out of aluminum foil, and I'll show you how to do that today. Take a square of aluminum foil about the size of the pie pan that you're using. Fold it in half, and in half again, and then with the scissor, we're going to cut the folded edge off in a semicircle fashion so that we're going to make ourselves a nice round shield. So when you unfold, you'll see that you have the circular shield that you can place on top of the pie. And it's going to protect the crust. So after 15 minutes, we want to reduce the heat to 340 degrees. Open the oven and carefully add your shield and bake the pie for 50 to 60 minutes. And look at the finished product. This pie is so amazing, with ice cream or without. These apples are fork tender, just like you made them when you cook them in the skillet. That is the key to this pie. That's what I think makes it next level, is that these apples are cooked ahead of time. The cardamom, the cinnamon, and the nutmeg are great together, and this pie is, again, world class. Make it, enjoy it. Every minute you spend on it is well worth it.